Welcome to In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm Jay Daniels. Thank you so much for taking a few moments to join us today. Recently, I had the great pleasure of meeting with three talented women from New York City, known collectively as the Duchess Trio. Amy Cervini, Melissa Stiliano, and Hilary Gardner started performing together as a trio back in 2013. 2 years later, in 2015, they released the self-titled album, Duchess. Their harmonies are reminiscent of the stylings popularized by the likes of the Boswell sisters and the Andrews sisters. And just a few days ago, Duchess released their latest, the album Live at Jazz Standard. Let's listen now to their stories as they share how each of their musical paths led them to this point.
When I was growing up, I was actually very much a classical pianist. So I spent a lot of time alone at my piano, hours and hours practicing. I started playing saxophone when I was, in fourth grade or something. And that was my entrance into jazz, because up until then I hadn't really heard anything. But saxophone is sort of inherently a jazz instrument. So I started playing in a big band. And from there, I ended up accidentally singing. It wasn't something that I ever studied, actually. Yeah, I mean, I didn't study it until I got to college, and even then, it was an afterthought. I was a saxophone major at New England Conservatory, and I split my studio between voice and saxophone. So I grew up heavily, like really just doing a lot of music. A lot of different kinds. I was a music theater major at an arts high school that I went to, and then was also in this big band that performed throughout the summer. And so just constant, and then, as I said, sort of chained to my piano for hours and hours. And, music was around the house. My mom used to wake us up in the mornings on the weekend with Rocky Horror Picture Show just blaring from downstairs. So it was always around, and was something that I actually fought for a long time. I didn't want that, because it was such an omnipresent thing in my life. But I wanted to be a doctor. But I found myself, not able. It wasn't my choice ultimately. It chose me, and then ever since.
Melissa, how about you?
My first memory of hearing jazz was being put to sleep with my brother and sister in the den, or like home office, and my mom turned on the CBC, and I remember looking at that like blue dial, something was glowing blue, and hearing instrumental jazz and just having that memory of it. But aside from music being played around the house, including the Beatles and Stevie Wonder, and a lot of Greek music. I'm half Greek, and my father was really, really a big fan of very epic Greek music, like Bolopoulos and Dalaras and these big, and he would sing along. Aside from that, nobody in my family played an instrument, or there was no direct like musical kind of direction in my family. And in high school, I decided to try out for some musical theater shows and some other shows that didn't have music in them. And I became involved in the drama club and loved that, and did everything from stage managing to producing, painting sets, and of course performing. And then after high school, with quite good grades and everything else, I could have gone in a couple of different directions. I decided to apply to theater school in Toronto, where I'm from, and I got into Ryerson Theater School, a conservatory-style acting program that didn't have any music in it. We had a music teacher, but I didn't like the way he taught singing, so I actually opted out of the class and studied privately with someone else. But it was mostly straight theater, as it was called back then. I don't know if people still say that.
Say straight play as opposed to musical.
Straight play, yeah. So it's that was what I thought my life focus was going to be. I thought I would do Sam Shepard and Shakespeare and everything in between, but just that, no singing. And then I was asked to sing in a big band with an acquaintance. I don't know if I was subbing or what, but it was crazy. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd been listening to Ella Fitzgerald a little bit, and sort of dabbling in some of the other singers via some of those, Blue Note box sets. That was the extent of what I knew, and also a little bit of jazz choir. And then I had my first experience singing jazz. I was scared out of my pants, but it was just totally addicting and invigorating and very scary. And then I just continued on that path. I dyed my hair purple, had some trouble getting some acting gigs because I had spiky purple hair, and I still can't tell you why I did that. But in the end, it sort of guided me to the other side of the world where I could still get gigs. And that was in like 97, and I've been doing it ever since and picking up education along the way. So I didn't study singing, I didn't study jazz, but I have been studying privately with lots of people in the years since, including the reason why I moved to New York, to study with Gary Dial and Theo Bleckman and Tom Schilling, who is still my voice coach. So,
same question for you. Tell us about some of your early musical experiences.
I grew up in a town called Wasilla, Alaska, so a pretty rural and cold environment. And there were always kind of a few tracks running in parallel musically. There was the music that kind of lived at home, which was the radio, and then a really, really great and eclectic collection of vinyl that my parents had each brought into their marriage individually and then shared collectively. So I was listening to and singing along with a lot of like Patsy Cline and Hank Williams and Joni Mitchell, and I loved Tom Waits and loved Stevie Wonder, Carmen McRae. It was a very eclectic set of records that we had, and I also was a classically trained singer from the time I was about 12 years old. I started studying classical voice and singing in a choral environment that was pretty competitive, and it was intense. I mean, we toured, we competed, we performed with the opera, with the Anchorage Opera Company, and we're the chorus. So I was a soloist in the Anchorage Opera. And I was doing classical voice competitions at that time as well. And then occasionally, like in high school, I did sing once or twice with a big band in high school, and I was singing along with and obsessively listening to as much classic kind of jazz as I could. So for me, that meant a lot of Ella Fitzgerald, a lot of Carmen McRae, a lot of Billie Holiday, some Anita O'Day. So I was really kind of diving into that education. So those tracks kind of were all running in parallel throughout my childhood and then young adulthood. I went to college after I did a foreign exchange in Italy, and I went to college afterward for a couple of years studying a classical voice degree, which I did not finish at that time. I dropped out and moved to Seattle, and that's where I started singing gigs. And when I decided to move to New York, these paths kind of all continued running side by side. I started studying with Mike Longo, actually, and singing with his band. Mike just died yesterday or two days ago. I started singing with Mike's big band and studying with him intensively, just time and a little bit of piano, but mostly kind of concepts about rhythm and about the architecture of the music and feel. But I also finished my classical voice degree at that time while I was singing and performing in jazz. So, and even today, I sing with Duchess, of course. We all have our individual kind of solo pursuits that fall under the umbrella of jazz. And then I'm also, I still have kind of a toe in the classical world. I still study, and I'm a member of a classical choir as well at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. So I kind of have stopped trying to decide or land on one of these paths and just sort of surrender to the fact that they're all really, they're very different, but they're connected musical pursuits, and they've been with me forever. And I think they probably will always all be with me. I don't have to choose.
And good music is good music, no matter which genre it comes from. Amy,
Very
I can't
true.
remember if you said this during your answer. Have you always lived into the end of the city, or did you move from elsewhere?
Oh, I am originally from Toronto. Like Melissa, we're both Canadian. And I moved here in 2000.
So I find it very interesting that each of you came from great distances to the city, and it's not because you came specifically to work with each other, and yet that's exactly what happened. It was a serendipitous performance in 2013 at a place called the 55 Bar in Manhattan.
Melissa and I both have residencies at the 55 Bar, which is a great small club. Just been there forever. Dive. I like to call it a dive. It's a dive bar in the West Village. And I tend to get a little bit restless, and I don't like to do the same thing every month. So I was looking for something new to do, and I asked my husband, Oded Lev Ari, for some suggestions. We were just bouncing ideas around. And I had previously sung with both Melissa and Hillary separately, and we also did I do a duet night at the 55 Bar once a year. Kind of depends on how my whims, what I'm feeling. But we had the three of us had sung together with Carolyn Lenhart, and we did a weirdo version of Mr. Sandman. And it was really fun. And it was, we didn't really practice. I think we got together once, and then we did this one tune together. And Oded had remembered that and said, why don't you get together some stock arrangements with Melissa and Hillary, and you guys could just, do a one-off sort of fun 3-part harmony thing. So we did, and we had enough material for one set. Maybe that's probably generous. And we did that one set. The place was packed. People loved it. We loved it. We had such a great time. It was clear probably before that our energies sort of meshed really well and easily together. But it certainly became apparent on stage with the back and forth and the banter. Yeah, we did the same set twice. It was, people stayed to hear different mistakes on the second set. It was it was really great. And I think really, that night we decided we had to keep it going, and we were going to do this again. And I think 4 or 5 months later, we were in the studio recording our first record.
And that was released, I think, in 2015. Is that right?
That sounds absolutely right.
Yeah, it was a self-titled album named Duchess. And I was listening to each of you sharing some of those early musical influences. I did not hear mention of the Boswell sisters or the Andrews sisters. And yet their music, their performances, their harmonizations have really become great influences for what you do as Duchess. Why are those two particular ensembles so important to each of you?
I would say that I was a little bit aware of the Boswell sisters before starting this project with Amy and Hillary, and very aware of the Andrews sisters. And that's a pretty common thing, I'd say, among the general public and even amongst musicians. In the late 90s, I was in a 3-part harmony group where we did just Andrews sisters transcriptions, and we went to the Army surplus store and got the really, really uncomfortable wool uniforms, and we did the whole thing for a little while because the swing craze was hitting Toronto. So I knew some of that repertoire from that time, and it was super fun. And I was also a bit of a swing dancer myself, so I loved that era and I loved that sound. But once I moved to New York, I can't say that I really pursued either doing it or listening to it. When Amy put this out there as an idea, I was excited because I was like, oh, well, thank goodness I know a couple of the tunes already. But really starting to dig into it and then explore the Boswell sisters in depth, I was so surprised and excited to hear what they had to offer from a full decade before the Andrews Sisters started to do it, from the 20s into the mid 30s. And the sophistication of the arrangements, the wackiness, the particular sound that they have. Being three sisters, of course, it blends so well, but it's not that kind of polished wall of sound that emerges in other harmony groups. It's you can definitely hear each individual voice. It's not completely perfect, and just so inventive and imaginative and playful, and also harmonically and rhythmically sophisticated. So I was so pleased to learn about them. And then when we started singing some of their arrangements right beside the Andrews Sisters arrangements, that's for me when it became apparent that, oh my goodness, let's go back to the source a little bit in terms of the repertoire, and we can look to them for a bit of a template. So although the Andrews Sisters were also wacky and funny, it's a pretty different thing, and it was a different time as well. So that was I can't even remember what the question was, but
no, I think you answered it very well. And I want to kind of stay in this general area for my next question, and this can come from all three of you. There is a difference, obviously, between solo performances and performing in an ensemble or a choir. Hillary, you mentioned that you work down at Fifth Street Presbyterian, and you sing in choir there. What would you say, being a close-knit group of three women, what are some of the greatest challenges in trying to find that vocal blend? What do you have to do in challenging yourselves to achieve that particular sound?
You have to start with the basic premise that, this is music you can't make by yourself. So anytime you're singing with other people, there is a completely different mentality in terms of how you're approaching the music that you're about to make. Like this, whether it's, three-part harmony, close harmony singing, or, a large-scale choral ensemble, or even a duet, it's not a solo endeavor. So I think, when I think about this music, when I conceive of this music as we make it, I'm not thinking at all about, an individual sound where it's a whole, it's a collective whole. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that we've spent a lot of time intensively going, we have to get our blend right. But there are all kinds of little things that one must think about in a more conscious way when you're singing with other people. Are consonants happening at the same time? Do the vowels line up? Do we all have the same concept of what the ah vowel is? There are all these really, really intricate kind of subtleties that that come into play. And, I wouldn't say that we're, obsessive or fixated overly on making those, perfect, whatever that even means. But, generally, if you're singing a standard with a rhythm section by yourself, you're not worried about your vowel. You're going to sing it the way that it comes out of your mouth, and in a conversational way. When you're singing with other people, there does have to be consideration. Who has the melody here? Which is the dominant voice in terms of the listener experience? So there are considerations, but I do think that if everyone is walking into the room, so to speak, knowing that this is music that we can only make together, that already is going to kind of solve myriad problems or potential vocal hazards, because you're going to be listening and paying attention in a different way than if we were singing by ourselves.
Thinking as a trio, what do each of you bring to Duchess? We'll start with Amy.
It's interesting. I think that one of the reasons that Duchess works is because of who we are musically and personally. I think there's just a really nice combination of personalities and combination of voices that just work. I think that anytime you're in any group, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And if you can figure out how to make all that work together, then you're golden, you know? You can't, it's hard to be in any kind of group doing anything if everyone is, you know, super passive. You need someone to be in charge and, you know, take the reins and say, this is what we're going to do, and let's all get on board. If everyone's just like, well, I don't know, nothing's ever going to happen, you know? So I think that, that it kind of depends on the day for us, what everyone's bringing to the table. I mean, we've had moments where like one person is down, and so the other two, that's kind of the beauty of having three of us. You're not on stage by yourself. You're not in this life by yourself. There are two others, or at the very least one other, who's going to pick you up and like drag you along with them if you're down. So I think that sort of depends. It really has depended on the moment for us, on the day, on the situation. I think in general, our stage personas, so to speak, are pretty clear, especially when you see us live. You know, we each have our role to play. Sometimes it's actually just about, you know, like if we're working with a band that we don't know, I'm counting off tunes. So I generally don't have time, or the mental space, not time, to like, you know, be coming up with funny banter. And like in those 10 seconds before the tune starts, I have to have a tempo in my head, or else it's, you know, a bunch of dead time where I'm trying to remember what song we're doing and how it goes. So we sort of weave and yeah. And I think that we have strengths and weaknesses, but it really does change. It changes for us regularly.
Melissa?
Amy, you're too modest. I mean, everything that Amy said is true, and I am the most important person in the group. Thank you, Amy. That's what I heard.
At least someone's being honest here.
No. But I mean, Amy's absolutely right. We help shoulder the burden together. We have, over the past 6.5 years, really learned how to support each other in our strengths and weaknesses, and thank goodness for that, because we've had to work in some not so ideal situations, including when one of us is really sick on stage. But we can make it work, and that's no easy feat. But Amy also, in addition to having come up with the idea, along with Oded Levarie, who is our producer and our arranger, and we credit him with the idea, actually. But Amy spearheaded it, and on stage she not only counts off the tunes, but she's, especially when we're on the road with a new band, really kind of running the rehearsal, because we tried a little bit, it doesn't work to have 3 leaders on stage, to have people wondering which of these ladies am I going to look to for this cue, for this count off. So Amy is a natural leader in that way. She's also our rehearsal pianist often if we're working on a new arrangement, and our liaison to our arranger, which is very useful and necessary. And Oded Levarie's part in this, we call him the 4th Duchess, and also sometimes we call him the Charlie to our angels. So he's really a hugely important part of what we do, not just because of his role in getting this started, but the fact that we can do what we want to do has a lot riding on Oded's ability to arrange these songs for us. And sorry, I may be jumping to another area, so I'll try to stop there, because we can talk about Oded later if you want. But yeah, Amy is super important on stage and off stage in so many ways, and she can sing so low you would not believe it. It's incredible.
But I can't sing high.
Yeah, so. But you sing high too.
No, I don't.
You do.
You're being very kind. Very kind.
Oded makes you go up there. You do it all, lady. But yeah, I don't have anything below like an F or an E below middle C. So it really enables us to do a lot more in terms of our range. So Amy is awesome.
If I need a compliment sandwich, I'm calling Melissa.
Yeah.
Well,
Hillary?
I think we all bring our unique histories and sensibilities to the group. We all have really diverse backgrounds, musically and otherwise, and it makes for just kind of a fun, quirky flavor combination, so to speak. I think it kind of has expressed itself in nice ways as well in terms of some of the repertoire that we've done. But yeah, we each have an individual sense of humor. We have distinct vocal personalities and styles and sometimes priorities. And that means that, in various musical situations, we can kind of draw on one another's strengths and experiences to hopefully make the music as fulfilling as it can be, and also have just a really good time on stage. I think there's just a really nice balance of personalities, of humor, of musical acumen.
And you mentioned a lot of the on-stage presence, and that is what people are going to experience with your latest album, Live at Jazz Standard.
Whether they want to or not.
And it was just released March the 20th. And, while all of us are stuck at home, basically, this would be a good time to find some music. So when people go to listen to this album, what is it that they're going to find?
They're going to get a front row seat at a Duchess show, I think, is kind of the idea and the hope and the timing of all of us in the wake of this really unprecedented time. I mean, that was a coincidence. Obviously, I mean, none of us could have predicted we'd be sitting here right now. But given the temperature of the room, so to speak, it's we're very gratified to be able to kind of offer something that is no longer available to us for the time being, which is attendance at a live show. It's really fun. You have the feeling of being in the room. The energy that night was really high. The crowd was excited. The band was excited. We were excited. And it really feels like being in the room, being at a club, having a great time at a show. So it's something that we were excited about to begin with, but to be able to kind of offer that right now is especially wonderful.
What are some of the tracks that people can find on the album?
It's really a combination of our recorded output so far. We picked basically a 1 hour set, one really strong 1 hour set. Some of our favorites, some of the audience's favorites, and a few things that we had never recorded before. So, of course, what has sort of become our signature song. We start most every show with our version of Love Being Here With You, that also has a second chorus with lyrics by Hillary that are more it's a Duchess chorus, stuff from our second record, Laughing at Life, including Swing Brother Swing, Everybody Loves My Baby, which is one of our Boswell sisters tunes. And then we did a few that we had never recorded before. We recorded, we performed Joseph, which is an Andrew Sisters transcription, which we had done with the Paul Taylor Dance Company. We wanted to sort of commemorate that collaboration. So we included Joseph, as well as Three Little Sisters, which has become a sort of audience favorite. It's one of the, circus act things that we do in our show, where we all play kazoos, which is not in the original Andrew Sisters version. Pretty certain that they were advised otherwise. And then we also, the other one that has never been recorded for us was one that we did on our very first gig, and we have tried to drop it many times. It's a version of Chattanooga Choo Choo. But I mean, the audience really loves it.
Give the people what they want.
You gotta.
That's right. They're the ones who are buying the albums, yeah.
We cannot escape the power of the Chattanooga Choo Choo.
All I can say is it's coming down track 29. So
there you go.
On board. Yeah. Last question, and we'll go down the line for this. It's a very short but very open-ended question. Why music?
It chose me. So I really only feel complete when I'm making music, when I am choosing to be involved. It brings me a joy that I have not found anywhere else. And I have tried to quit numerous times. It doesn't work for me. I really think it's it's such a like Oprah Winfrey moment, but it's a calling. And I really, I don't have a choice.
Melissa.
Music brings me joy more than anything else that I have done in my life. And it also makes me feel more connected to other people, to the musicians I'm playing with, to myself, and to the people that I play music for, when that's a live situation. And I love that feeling. It feels very primal, and it's something that kind of primal and important thing that all humans can do. And I love doing it with these ladies. It's really the most fun that I have on stage is with these gals.
Finally, Hillary Gardner.
I have two quick kind of parts to this answer. The one I just want to offer in gratitude and tribute to Mike, who told me some years ago when I showed up for a lesson, Mike Longo, who died night before last of complications from COVID, actually. But he told me once when I showed up at a lesson, just broke and tired of being broke and tired and just ready to not be doing this Sisyphean effort of trying to make it as a jazz singer, whatever that even meant. And he said, listen, you can quit, but the thing is, you'll still be a musician. He said, you didn't choose this, it chose you. So if you quit, like, you'll still be a musician. That's not up to you. You'll just be a more frustrated musician. So I think some of the answer to what you're asking, Jay, is there's just a surrender to it. And I would suspect that a lot of musicians that you speak to probably say something similar, that it really isn't as much a choice as it is just kind of an acceptance of one's self, that those of us who are doing this, we'd have to do it. It's what we do. If there was something else that we could do, that we could do that would work for us, we'd be doing it, because this is not an easy path. The other thing that I'll offer up that we've heard as Duchess, we've heard from our friends and fans, and more recently I've heard as well after the last gig that I did at Mesro earlier in the month, a number of people tell us, they thank us for helping them to either take their mind off events of the day or to feel more connected to the world around them, to process emotions that they're going through. And I think in our culture, which kind of systematically tends to devalue or dismiss the arts and the humanities, it's easy even for musicians and artists to forget that this is actually, I think it's a sacred responsibility. And I think that we can help to heal ourselves and other people and provide a respite and a refuge for people. And doesn't mean that we get there every time. It doesn't mean that we're curing cancer, but we interviewed Jessica Molaski for our podcast a year or two ago. We interviewed her, and she talked about how she had this director once in the world of theater who said, listen, we're not curing cancer here. And she said, you know what, though, maybe for an hour, that is what's happening at these concerts. Maybe for an hour, that is what is happening with music. I just think that the power of music and connection and art is bigger and more profound than any of the individuals who are involved in the process. So that's what we're trying to do.
The Duchess Trio with Amy Cervini, Melissa Stiliano, and Hillary Gardner. Thank you so much for taking the time to say hello.
Thank you.
Jay.
Thank you.
Be sure and visit their website, duchesstrio.com for more information on their new album, Live at Jazz Standard. I'm looking forward to getting a copy for myself, too. Until we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.